Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Good Tavach Shavua Tov. We are learning Mishnah's Kesubos, Parag Zayin, Mishna Ches. We started Mishna Ches on Friday. We'll just start reading from the beginning again quickly, and then we'll finish up the Mishnah. She had blemishes, meaning they discovered on her blemishes, physical blemishes, while she was still in her father's house. So we're talking about it's after the Erisin. And now they discovered the blemishes. And the question is, when did these blemishes exist? Did they exist already before the Erisin, or they only come after the Erisin? So the Mishnah says, so the father has to bring proof. The father has to bring proof. That it was after she already become Arus, how she become married, betrothed to this man. That these blemishes developed on her. And his field got flooded. Meaning, he has to prove, the father has to prove that these blemishes were not here before the Erisin. If they were there before the Erisin, that means that the marriage was a mistake. He never wanted to marry her if she had those blemishes. If the blemishes came after the Erisin, then, basically that's the way it is. He married her. There were no blemishes then. Now she had the blemishes. It's his problem. But the point here is we don't know when it happened. So being that these blemishes were found while she was in the father's domain, we're talking about, as we said, a Naira, a young girl who is married off by her father. Her father receives the Kedushin. Her father would be the one that would receive her get, which would be divorced, and collect a ksuba from the husband. So the thing is, though, that without knowing when the blemishes came about, whether the marriage was a mistake or not, and if he were to divorce her, he wouldn't have to give her a ksuba. I mean, under certain circumstances, he didn't have to give her a divorce, as we said before, if he actually made a specific condition. But the point here is that these blemishes were discovered while she was still by her father. And the rule is, kanimtza kanhaya. We have to take into account a principle that if this is where it was found, this is where it's always been. And therefore, there is a strong reason to say that her blemishes were already there before the marriage, before the Erisin. And unless the father proves otherwise, the husband will not have to pay the ksuba. Okay, so that's what we did Friday. Now, let's say the story is a little bit different. The blemishes were discovered after she entered the domain of the husband. Entering the domain of the husband means that chuppah was done. She went to the chuppah. The marriage was completed. And only after that did he discover these blemishes. So now, where were the blemishes discovered? By the husband, not by the father. She was already in the husband's domain. And if so, that means if we're following the principle of kan nimtza kan haya, where it was found, that's where it's always been. In this case, where was it found? By the husband. And therefore, we should say, if it was found by the husband, it was always by the husband. Which means that when did these blemishes develop? They developed after they got married, but not before they were married. And therefore, if they developed after they got married, not before, then that means that there was no mistake about the marriage, no blemishes there by the marriage. And if he wants to say there was blemishes before the marriage, he's got to bring the proof. So that's where the Mishnah says, if she entered into the domain of the husband, that means they went to the chuppah, they got married fully, and that's when the blemishes were discovered. And the question is, again, did the blemishes develop now? Did the blemishes develop even before the kedushin was made, before they were married? If it was a mistake, we don't know. But being that in this case, the blemishes were found in the domain of the husband, the husband has to bring the proof, that even before the kedushin, these blemishes were there, and therefore his purchase, his kedushin that he made, the marriage that he made, was a mistake. But he's got to prove it, because being that now the blemishes were found in his domain, we say they were found in his domain, they were there in his domain, which would therefore say that we would not take into consideration that the blemishes were there before the marriage, before the Erisin, and it's up to him to prove that it was there before the Erisin, and until he proves that, if he divorces her, he's going to have to give her a ksuba, because there were no mistakes here. There were no mistakes. We assume there were no mistakes to be made. The blemishes came after the marriage took place. Divrei Rabbi Meir, these are the words of Rabbi Meir. Okay? So what we had here is, we had a case where we didn't know when the blemish is developed, before the marriage or after the marriage. The rule is, where the blemishes were found, that who has to now prove when the person where the blemishes were found is now the person who has to prove when they took place in order for them to, so to speak, win the case. If the blemishes were found by the father has to prove that the blemishes only came after the marriage, so that a ksuba can be collected if he decides to divorce her. And if the blemishes were found in the domain of the husband, then it's the husband who doesn't want to pay the ksuba because he wants to say the marriage was a mistake. He has to prove that the blemishes were there before marriage. And if he doesn't, we assume they were after the marriage, and he'll have to give her a ksuba if he divorces her. That's the first part of the Mishnah. And the Chachamim say that remember, the Chachamim are going to qualify now everything we've been saying. But when were these words said? Which words? When can a husband claim that the marriage is invalid because he found that his wife had physical defects? This person here, what his husband is claiming, I married her on the condition there were no defects, or with the intention of no defects, and now I found defects. It was a mistake. They tricked me. When can he have the possibility of being able to claim that? But mumin shebeseser, when these physical blemishes are on the hidden parts of her body. They're not out there. They're not out there in the open. They're hidden on her body. And therefore, in that situation, he could say, I never saw them. I didn't know them. I couldn't notice them. You knew them. He says to the woman's father, to the girl's father, you knew them. You should have told me. I made a condition. I married her with the intention of her not having any defects. I had no way of knowing they were there because they're on the hidden parts of her body. So the whole thing was a mistake. But if, let's say, we're talking about physical blemishes that are exposed on the exposed parts of her body, he should have been able to have seen it. And nonetheless, he still went and he married her. Then he can't say, she has blemishes. I never wanted to marry her, but she had blemishes. The blemishes right there in front of your face. They're on the exposed part of her body. You should be able to have seen it. And therefore, that means you saw it and you let it go. You didn't care. You married her anyway. And therefore, can't claim now that the marriage was a mistake. So the Chachamim are qualifying this in a very logical way, that he can claim it's a mistake about the blemishes if he couldn't see the blemishes. He had no way of knowing about them. But if he had a way of knowing about them because they're on the exposed parts of her body, he can't claim it was a mistake. However, now let's say there's a bathhouse in that city. That means everybody takes a bath there. Means including this girl that he was going to marry, right? She took a bath there. You know who else took a bath there? The other female members of his family. In that situation, even on blemishes and the hidden parts of her body, he can't claim and say it was a mistake. Why? Because he could actually examine her through his female relatives, meaning they were there with her. They should have seen it, and they should have told him. Or we assume, how do we say it here? His female relatives would have seen her defects and told him of them. In a situation where, so even when it comes out, the blemishes are in the hidden parts of her body. Nonetheless, if they could have been seen, if there's a bathhouse in the city and everybody bathes there, then the female members of his family would have seen the defect and they would have told him. So he can't say, I didn't know. You knew. We can assume that you knew. If your female members of your family, they saw her. If there was a defect there, they would have told you. And being that you just went through with it, it means either there's no defect or you didn't care. So at the end of the day, he can't make any claims to say that the marriage was a mistake because of these physical blemishes. Okay. Now, Ma'ay tzarich lizoer. B'midas hagaruay sheregilim laganois sad echad leinei tzad ha'acher al inyon m'shem behen mamish. If you try to go ahead and warn someone about not going to a shidduch with someone, don't do it. Excuse me. Be careful to to go ahead and start making up issues or making up problems, shortcomings that really don't mean anything. The hainu. Ishtam. The chassan, the man, the prospective groom, He's a simple person. He's not that sharp to be able, he's not that street smart to be able not to be fooled by other people's trickery. He's not such a sharpshooter. He's a simple person. He's a person that can easily be tricked by other people, but is that something wrong? Is that something wrong? Let us say something wrong. Could be a nice guy, nice fellow. Okay, so he's not the sharpest tack. He's not able to keep up with all the shysters and cunning people in town. But is that necessarily a bad thing? So that's something. So now a person might go ahead and say, "Oh, you want to marry off your daughter to this guy? This guy, he's not on the ball. He's not on the ball. He's not sharp. That he says that's not a reason. That's not something wrong that you be able to go ahead and say something for. Or you know what? He doesn't fool around like the other young men his age. He's a serious guy. He doesn't waste his time. He doesn't joke around or hang around with other people who just waste their time. Because of that, you know what they say about him? Oh, he's a fool. He's a fool. There's something wrong with him. If people say about him that he's a fool, no one's going to want to marry him. That could actually cause to break up a shidduch that was made. Or similar type of evil things that people do. Meaning, they go ahead and they categorize a person in a way that's negative, that really they have no right to go ahead. There's no real reason to go ahead and do that. You say he's a fool. Why is he a fool? Because he's not hanging around with all the other people in the street. Or because he's not sharp enough to go ahead and stand up to the people who would trick him. And you call him a fool because of that? That's the problem. Hashem should cut off all the lips of the liars because of this. These are words of a pasuk. Not only are they people who speak lashon hara because of what they're doing, and typically when you're dealing with these kinds of things, you can rarely find that it fits any of the conditions mentioned before that allows you to say something negative about a person. Not only that, forget about that they're speaking derogatorily about the person. It's lashon hara. It's a lie. To call the person a fool because of these things is not true. And that means you fall into the category of Maitzi Shemra. You're spreading a false name. That's an even more serious form of lashon hara. And let's say it's really true. That's really true. He's not all there. Something missing. Something missing in his intellect. Something seriously missing. Then you have to go in and make sure that you fulfilled all conditions mentioned before to be able to say that about a person. So again, his point here is that there's an unfortunate tendency for people to categorize a person in a very negative way, even though the reasons behind it are not really sufficient to call him that. And therefore, it's not really lashon hara, it's spreading lies. Could there be a reason that maybe if he's not that sharp, that it's not a good shidduch? It's possible. But if the reason you're breaking up the shidduch is because you're telling him, oh, he's a fool, and it's because of the fact that he's not that sharp, that's a lie. That's not true, and that's a terrible thing to do, and that's what the Chaim is trying to say is forbidden to do, and unfortunately, people tend to do it. Have a wonderful day. A good Tavach. Shavua Tov.
Thank you, Rabbi.